No role plays, just real. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader.
We've never really, as a workforce, spent a lot of time on making sure we're developing good leaders.
We'll be able to share stories, experience, mistakes, failures, successes.
This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on this episode, I want to go over something that started as a listener question, and they asked to kind of not be named on the podcast, so we'll kind of keep that private. But they were asking how specifically what they should do when they're having a hard time getting noticed by people in the organization that might open doors for them or give them more opportunities, especially because their direct boss was not kind of taking an interest in them, was not kind of throwing them a bone or giving them more projects, and they feel like they're kind of stagnating because of the kind of the hierarchy or chain of command, so to speak, that exists. How do they kind of navigate those waters without making it look like they're kind of going over somebody's head? In essence, how do they go over somebody's head without making it look like they're going over somebody's head?
Sure, absolutely.
And I, we answered that question for that listener, and that's great. But it got me thinking about an article that we saw more than a year ago now that I thought really delved into this well. And it's an article that was in Harvard Business Review called How to Get Noticed by Your Boss's Boss. And, we recommended the article to the listener who wrote us and kind of gave some more insight to it. But I thought it might be something that our listeners, the other listeners might be having the exact same issues. There's a lot of this out there when it comes to people feeling like they're at the mercy of one person and not being able to move forward with how they want to move forward. And so this article by Melissa Raffoni goes through actually 10 different things that people should be doing in order to get noticed by their boss's boss. It's too much information to go over in one episode, so I'm thinking we do kind of a series of episodes on this, and we'll go over a few of them for each episode until we kind of get them all in. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I love the idea, and I think it's a great point that even if you're not having this specific maybe issue or you don't have this specific concern, there's some really good information in this article, and I'm sure that we'll have some good back and forth just around how we've seen this play out for ourselves or the experiences we've been through. But I think it's always important to consider, especially if you're looking to progress your career, to consider how do you show up for people, and how do you show up for people like a direct boss? How do you show up for people throughout your organization, for other influencers, for other decision makers, right? I think I've had conversations recently as well just around opportunities and open roles and open jobs. And there's always kind of this itch to I should apply for this job. And, now's the time. But like 3 months ago or 6 months ago or a year ago, when it was like, what's the work that you want to do? And do you want to kind of spend time in the space around building your network or collaborating across different places, there wasn't this much interest. And so it's kind of like there's always a time to consider thinking about how do you make sure that people are aware of the work that you're doing, but in a way that allows you to not feel like you're constantly pushing for the next job or that you're trying to outshine everybody. So I think that we're going to have some good dialogue in this series, and I'm hopeful that we'll hear from listeners that maybe hear a couple of these and maybe they want to dive even deeper or have some unique situations going on that we can help to discuss as well.
There's also this situation where maybe your direct boss is not doing anything wrong. Maybe they're doing everything they should be doing as far as, promoting you and giving you the challenges you're looking for and trying to open doors for you. And even in the face of all of that, there's still a right way to go about things to make sure that their boss notices you too. And there's also a lot of wrong ways too. You could be not doing the right things and not being noticed by any layers above your direct boss, even if your direct boss is taking responsibility for doing it. And so a lot of this responsibility falls on you regardless of what your boss is doing. And so the first one of these kind of tips that Melissa states in this article says that you're supposed to demonstrate your commitment to your growth and to the company. And I like this because we've talked on the podcast many times about our responsibility to personal growth. If you can tie in that personal growth to whatever your job is, then that's even better. You can't always, but if you can, that's fantastic. And that could be anything from, figuring out what kind of strategy books there are out there on the things that your organization does, or just kind of diving in deep to what the scorecards mean or what the metrics mean for your particular part of the business. Maybe that's not something that is shared with you readily because it's not something you need necessarily on a day-to-day basis, but being able to know about it and speak to it, it can be an invaluable resource to your boss and your boss's boss when it comes to these conversations. But it starts with you kind of taking initiative and saying, I want to learn about these things, not waiting for them to kind of fall in your lap.
And I love the idea of kind of approaching this from like a self-educating kind of perspective. And I've had a lot of conversation recently with people specifically around the constant evolution of leadership and how leaders need to show up and what are we doing personally to learn, to grow, to take in different content, to take courses and learn things. And so like I'm a huge fan of that. I'm a huge fan of asking leaders, whether it's your direct leader or other leaders that you engage with around like, hey, I'm continuing to learn myself and challenge myself to sharpen up my leadership skills. Are there any books that you recommend? Are there any videos or TED Talks or anything at all that you are listening to, any podcasts that you enjoy or recommend or feel would add value to the role that I'm currently in? Right? Like that type of an approach, that willingness and that want to find other ways to sharpen skill, build skill, do self-reflection, things like that, I think is not only, advice that I would give to leaders, but it's going to be required of leaders because as our people continue to have access to education, certifications, that type of stuff, like that, we need to role model that. So I really like that approach, and I think it's such an easy way to. It doesn't feel. I don't think it feels offensive to ask your boss's boss or somebody that you meet just like, hey, it's great to meet you. So great to connect. Really appreciate this. Like, I'm continuing to work on becoming the best leader I can be in my current role. Are there any, books or things that you recommend? Or are there any skills that you feel are really important to my role that I should be making sure that I'm either implementing or that I'm sharpening for my own personal journey and learning? Like, I think it's a great way to go about finding information, showing that you have this intrinsic motivation to want to do more without it feeling like you're going over top of somebody's head.
Right. And, in some cases, your boss's boss is readily available to you. It's, maybe they're on the same floor of the same building. Right. But in other cases, maybe your boss's boss is someone you don't even see on a daily basis. Maybe you don't see your boss's boss except maybe, once every couple of weeks or once a month or even less than that. Because of that, it's really important to have, what is known as an elevator speech. And it's something that is, it's good to have for just those cases where you come across somebody as far as what you want to say. And it can't look like a sales pitch, but it can be rooted in, here are the things I'm working on right now. So if you happen to come across your boss's boss and you're talking about things, because they'll likely ask you, how are you? What are you doing right now? What projects are you working on? It'd be really cool to be able to say the projects that you're working on right now are not just things that are in the scope of the work that you have been assigned, but rather something that you've decided to take on that impacts the broader organization or team as a whole. Something where if it didn't get done, it wouldn't be on you to get it done. It's something that you've decided to take on because you enjoy your job and you've mastered the day-to-day of your own job enough to be able to say, hey, you know what? I want to take on something more because this is where my passions lie, and then be able to talk about it in the times when you meet your boss's boss. That will go over very, very well in terms of just leaving a lasting impression, first of all, but two, plan on having a conversation about it, because when your boss's boss hears something that you're working on that is more company specific as opposed to just you specific, believe me, they're going to want to know more about it. And even if it's not a conversation that happens right away, it will happen inadvertently by kind of starting the ball rolling over time, and it may involve your boss too. But the best way to start that process is to be prepared for those conversations to happen, so that when they do, or if they do, you don't feel like you're fumbling or fidgeting or not knowing the right words to say. Incredibly important. The other thing that I want to talk about on this episode when it comes to these skills is focusing on the team success rather than your own. And this goes back to the last thing I just said here, which is what things are you taking on that don't just demonstrate a mastery of your own job or the things that you're responsible for, the things that are going to be on your review? What things are you taking on that have broader implications than just your own, kind of purview?
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And I also think that when I read that, I think about the rooms that we're in sometimes, and when work is being discussed or results are being discussed or things like that, the ability to talk about the team and to talk about yes, thank you. Like, I'm really proud of the work that we've done collectively as a team, or I'm happy to report that the team and I have spent a lot of time in this space focused on this, getting this done, and just making sure that it's not just, oh, thank you so much, as the department head or as the leader of this type of thing, like, feel really great about it and thank you for that. And yep, I've made sure that everybody is aligned. Like, there's a time and place for that. But I think that when you're looking to get noticed, and the article really states this well, is like, the leaders typically are looking for, how do you influence others, and how do you work together, and how do you see the work, and do you see it as a team of people getting the work done, or do you just see it as me, I? Now, the flip side of this coin is often, when you are someone who talks about the team and the team movement, when you are interviewing for that job, now you have the attention, now you're in an interview, you have to figure out a way to make sure that you're talking about the work that you did as a part of that team or leading that team. Because when you get into the interview spot for the job, to say like, well, we did this, we did that, the team did this, I mean, I'm going to scratch my head and be like, okay, that's great, but like, what did you do? Like, you're the one interviewing for the job. The team is not interviewing for the job. So I think it's important that you do both. And I think that it's important that you make sure that you're clear about the part that you played in the team when you're talking about the work, when you have those types of opportunities.
Right. This is a very big case of know your audience. Know the room, read the room. There are different responsibilities that you have depending on who you're talking to. If you're doing that elevator speech, if you are kind of in passing, you get asked about the work that you're doing, totally give the credit to your team if you're leading the team, because if the team accomplished that goal, you need to show the humility of saying that it wasn't you who did everything. You want to give the credit to your team. But when you're interviewing, when you're kind of taking advantage of that, and everything is kind of culminated into this, all right, you've showcased this, you've done all this work, now it's time to actually take credit for that work. It doesn't show a lack of humility to take credit for the work that you actually did, as long as you actually did it. And so what that could look like is, if the team is doing something, well, the outcomes were accomplished by the team, right? That wasn't accomplished by you specifically, but you did do something on that. What did you do? Well, you worked specifically with these 6 people who were kind of bringing up the rear for performance numbers for the month, and you spent 2 hours a week with each of them, going through role plays, going through scenarios with clients and customers of what could be done, and making sure that the next time they had an interaction, it went well. You sat back and you watched those interactions, and then you gave them critiques afterwards. Whatever you actually did do that led to that success of the team, it's okay to say that if it was actually you that did that. In fact, it's important to say it because at the end of the day, it's not your entire team that's interviewing for that role. It's you that is interviewing for that role once you've actually earned it.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1-minute hack. But first, a few words from our sponsors.
The 1-minute hack.
All right, for this episode's 1-minute hack, here's what I want you to do. The next time you're having a conversation with your boss, or ideally your boss's boss, or both, if you can make it happen with both, that's even better. I want you to be able to speak to 2 things. One, I want you to be able to talk to the work that you're working on with your team in order to help make them better, and in order to kind of strive for company goals or team goals as opposed to your own goals. In the context of that conversation, and in saying that, I want you to ask your boss or your boss's boss what skills you should be working on in order to get even better at the job you're currently doing. And that could be anything from a book they might recommend, or a podcast they listen to, or a skill that they spend time working on in order to get them better at their job that you can kind of do as well. Anything that kind of brings this back to you showing a commitment to getting better outside of what the company is going to just voluntarily teach you or provide to you on its own will show a commitment to doing better at the work that you're doing, even when it comes to the time that you're putting in to your team and to your own kind of personal growth and development. Do those things, and you'll find that that conversation gets started right at the beginning. It'll be a lot easier as we move through this list of things to do. It'll be a lot easier to kind of make these conversations more fluid and more easy to have, and less likely to have it look like you're going over your boss's head when you have these conversations.
Yeah, I think it's a great woman to hack. And just we had an episode a little while ago just about building network and talking about how do you continue to build relationships. And I think that anytime that you can approach the dialogue, specific to saying like, hey, I'm here, I'm passionate about the work, I'm looking to not only do a good job, but like I have, motivations to want to do more and potentially to see potential, career opportunities. Like, but I know that those things come with the need for me to build skill, or to be more consistent, or to get more comfortable around the responsibilities of the next job or that type of thing. Like, those that really proactively reach out to say, I want more, but I also know that I need to work on things to get there. That is a really great way to open up conversations, to build relationships, and to show your willingness to go out there and do the work. And so I think it's a really I would love to hear more of it. I think I've had those that have come to me over the years, kind of with that exact same thing of like, hey, I'm here. I would love to, beyond the like, can you give me any feedback, or what are your thoughts, or that type of thing on the work that I'm doing? But they're just like, hey, like I feel like I'm doing some good work. I would always love your thoughts or feedback on how I can get better. Also, I'm looking for more, or I'm thinking about my career. What advice do you have, or what things, do you think would be helpful for me? And I love to give book recommendations and video recommendations and links to different podcasts and different people that are out there with the content. And I always appreciate that. And then it's really cool when they come back around and say, hey, I read that book, or I'm in the middle of that book, or I watched that video, or I listened to that podcast, and just the follow up. Like, I don't know, like that to me is just one of those things that's such a foundational element of great leaders, that when I see it or when I hear it, it's just like, how much more can I give them? Because I just know that it's going to play itself out to creating a really great opportunity. Right.
And you will stand out in a sea of people whose MO is to say, I want more, give me more from a promotion standpoint. I want more. I want you to give me what I'm looking for first, which is the more responsibility, the promotion, the title, whatever it is. And then I will show you how I do that job. If you're the person who comes and says, this is the job I eventually want, I need to know what I need to work on in order to get it. That's a very, very different conversation talking to your boss. And it puts the ball in your own court and says that you want to own this and take responsibility of it, as opposed to, asking your boss to take responsibility of it for you. The last thing you want to remember here too is that someone who makes those around them better is invaluable. So go into this with that mindset. Any person whose time is spent helping to make those around them better will make themselves an invaluable part of any team, versus a person who's just focusing on themselves.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.